This is The Roadmap with Lee Heisman.
Hello everyone, this is Lee Heisman and welcome to The Roadmap. Each and every week we're going to be bringing you entrepreneurs and their journey on scaling and selling their businesses. This week we have a personal friend of mine and a special guest, Zack Zelner.
Lee, thanks for having me.
Absolutely, Zack, welcome to the show. Zack is an illustrious entrepreneur with many, many successes. And Zack started his career when he was 18 years old. You opened a company called DocMJ and also ZBaked.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little about how you grew those businesses and how you eventually sold those businesses?
Yeah, those were over a period of a few years, right? So first I started ZBaked, which was a cookie delivery company out of my apartment. I was a freshman at Florida State, and I had to make money somehow. And I said I'd much rather do that in an entrepreneurial way. There were customers all over Florida State's campus, and I said, well, there's nothing really stopping me from going and baking up cookies and trying to find some way to build a business out of it. We grew pretty large. We had over 100 delivery drivers. We ended up in Tallahassee, Orlando, and Tampa. Sold millions of cookies over those years, and it all started from a plastic folding table out of my apartment.
Millions of cookies over those years.
Yeah. I used to say billions of calories sold. So, it was an incredible, kind of trial for me in learning the ins and outs of business, starting to hire people, starting to learn how to work with employees. And it was that first iteration on problem solving and figuring out how you market a service and create value for a customer, right? I think the entire journey of building a business starts and ends with how do I create value for somebody, and then how do I build an infrastructure to grow that, to create more value for more people. That is, of course, challenging. But for young entrepreneurs especially, the best thing to do is really to dive in head first. I did drop out. It's something that I, to this day, kind of wish I didn't, ironically, despite some success. But it led to other businesses like DocMJ. DocMJ was a medical cannabis recommendation chain. So we had physicians' offices all over Florida, and I hired physicians that worked there who were able to evaluate patients and issue them what's called a recommendation, almost like a prescription, to then visit a dispensary in Florida. And that market was nascent. It was just starting to grow. And at that time, while there were dispensaries coming, there was no adjacent or secondary services supporting patients that wanted to visit those dispensaries, among other things. And when you look at it simplistically, it comes back to delivering cookies. It's how do I solve a problem for somebody and create value for them, and then how do I build the infrastructure to do that at a larger scale?
Well, I also like, Zack, for the viewers out there, I don't know if there was coincidence or not that you were doing a medical marijuana plus cookies. They seem to go hand in hand.
They had no connection whatsoever.
Okay.
I would like to be clear. To anybody listening, there was no connection.
Fair.
Yes.
So you talk a little about this, and that's what the roadmap's about, is the journey. You started this, you scaled it. Talk about what was the right time for you to sell these businesses?
I'm not sure that it was necessarily a right time. I think the opportunity to exit presented itself, but I wasn't looking to sell. I really think that there's a time and place for exit strategies, but for most entrepreneurs, coming in with an exit strategy is sort of a fool's errand because the business evolves and changes, right? The best thing that you can do is build a business that has value, right? A business that works, that has a healthy bottom line. And ultimately, the opportunities present themselves to exit. For us at DocMJ, we had built an extensive infrastructure. We had 15 offices around the state of Florida. And so when I exited that company, it had a foundation that could then be built upon. And now it's the largest issuer in the world of medical cannabis cards, all in the last 5 years.
It's amazing.
It's a pretty exciting thing, yeah.
Well, let's talk about some of your successes as well past that point.
Sure.
Of course, you sold that business, which is wonderful, and it's still in existence today. It's really nice when you have a legacy of a business that you grew, started, sold, and it still has grown to the largest in the world. Yeah. Let's talk about what you're most recognized for. Pup socks. If you out there, and any viewers out there, have ever ordered socks with your dog or your animal on it, it's usually coming out of Zack's company here. You took Pup Socks. It is the fastest growing e-commerce store in history. You did $8 million of revenue, and I'm going to say this slowly, in 30 days. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, one of the fastest. Let's just be clear.
Fair.
I mean, Kylie may have beat us with her lip kits. But yeah, ultimately it was an incredible success. It didn't come without huge challenges though. So when we launched that business, there was two questions we needed to answer. The first was, how do we develop a product that fits a customer that we understand so well? And this is where people really struggle with marketing, with sales. Conversion rate, it's just a factor of how well you know your customer and your ability to speak to them. For us, we honed in on that really powerfully and then used social media as leverage to be able to carry that message out to the masses. We ended up on Good Morning America, The Today Show, The View. The second part of that business was much more difficult, which was being able to produce and distribute 250,000 pairs of custom socks with pets' faces on them to hundreds of thousands of homes around the world. And the challenge with that is we were reliant on third-party manufacturers who time and again said, no problem, keep taking orders, you'll be fine. And these are the trials and tribulations that you go through as a founder, because you sell, and all of a sudden, now the companies that you were relying on, the partners you were relying on, the employees you were relying on, fall through. And your ability to cope with that is really a measure of your capacity as an entrepreneur. Some people fold and go out of business. Some people handle the situation at different levels. And I think your ability to play that game, mitigate all of that, the consequences of those challenges, is what determines how successful you ultimately will be. For us, it set us back years in many ways, because we scaled so much, but there were a lot of people who were really upset with us. And we had to figure out how, when we come back to the marketplace, we're going to have the infrastructure to be able to fulfill the promises we make, even if our vendors fail us. And over time, that meant getting into the kind of nitty-gritty of manufacturing ourselves.
Well, and that's kind of a great segue. You are now also your newest business, Thread Studio, which is not far from the studio here, less than a mile. And our producer Chris even commented he sees that sign all over the place. Yeah. And a lot of people in the community know it. But you are one of the largest print-on-demand manufacturers in the entire South.
Yeah.
You print for clients like Disney, Target, Michaels. Mm-hmm. And if I'm incorrect, you started this business, I know, out of the necessity of dealing with third-party vendors at your old business and running into those issues, but you started at a very inopportune time. Inopportune time. And this is March of 2020 during COVID.
That's right.
Can you speak to that?
Yeah. When COVID hit, non-essential businesses, which custom dog socks are pretty non-essential, were hit hard. Whether or not they were in e-commerce didn't matter. Businesses like that were not doing well. And Pup Socks had an 80% drop in revenue. And at that point, we had already moved into our own manufacturing, but it was small. It was a little operation, but focused on print on demand. Everything's custom at scale. So in early 2020, we said, well, can we build a business out of doing custom printing? And at that time, we didn't know who our clients would be, but we figured there must be other Pup Sock style companies in the world that need this. And we landed a ton of clients over the last couple of years, Shutterfly and Zazzle and Redbubble, some of the names you mentioned as well. And now we're in 140,000 square feet here in Peachtree Corners in Gwinnett County. And it's become an operation that I'm immensely proud of, and one that goes against all of the struggles that we once faced. Now we actually compete with the same companies that failed us years ago, and provide a service to make sure that companies that depend on us never have to go through what we went through at Pup Socks.
I have to comment, because I've known you for many, many years. I'm always inspired by your work ethic. There was a moment during COVID when you're installing equipment at this facility, and a lot of entrepreneurs and individuals that are viewing today need to understand this. They delivered this very large manufacturing equipment. Mm-hmm. People were not allowed to fly. People from other countries where this equipment came over were not allowed to fly.
That's right.
What were you doing? And I love this story because you've told it to me. How exactly did you get this equipment put together when people from other countries were not allowed in our country during COVID?
Right, yeah, the engineering team that was supposed to install all of this equipment that we had, really bet everything we had on. We needed this working for our holiday season, and we had made commitments, and to fulfill those, we needed the equipment. Day and night, we were on video chats with engineers in Japan, in Mexico, a team from Italy, and we ourselves were building all of the equipment. I think that it really does require a whatever it takes kind of approach, and you have to be mindful of the promises you make, right? Because the whatever it takes can really spiral out. And you've seen me working 120-hour weeks to make sure that We fulfilled the promises we had made to customers and to our clients. But at the end of the day, one thing that has changed for me really over the last year, Lee, when these kinds of issues would occur, it would be very stressful, right? It would be exhausting for me. And the last year, as difficult as it's been growing this business, right? Thread Studio in the last 2 years has grown immensely. And even though revenue growth is a good thing, that doesn't necessarily mean you're profitable. That, especially when you have huge amounts of capital expenditures on more and more equipment and a bigger and bigger building and so on and so forth. But my identity started to shift. And I think this is what's really important for entrepreneurs that are trying to scale from, let's say $1 million plus. Below that point, you're trying to find a way to solve a specific issue. And you can do it typically with your own two hands or a small team of employees. But as you grow, it no longer is about your ability to solve a problem. It's number one, the infrastructure you build around you, the people that you empower to solve those problems, the method and systems of communication, right? Your internal network now has to sustain and support the commitments that have been made. But two, for yourself personally, it's an understanding that this journey is not going to be easy. And the longer you believe that it's going to just be a cruise, the more disappointed you're going to be. So when I realized this is my chosen game, as a founder, I've decided to play a brutal sport. But if I start crying every time I get in the ring and get punched, maybe being a champion boxer is not the vision I should have for myself.
Fair,
right?
Very fair.
So these things happen and we get so upset, and all we want to do is get right back on offense, right? We want to go win a deal. We want to go expand. And it sucks that an employee, a disgruntled employee, or an employee who failed at their job caused these issues, or, this machine broke down. But nobody ever told you that you'd get to play offense all the time. And when these things happen for me now, I get excited because I know the harder we play defense, the faster we solve the problem, the quicker we get back to playing offense. And so I revel in it in the exact same way that
I've watched your evolution over the years, and this is a whole different Zack Zelner that I'm sitting in front of than it was 2 years ago, 3 years ago, or 4 years ago. So, all of your experience and your successful scaling of your older businesses and selling them, they seem to have landed you into a spot where you're not going anywhere. What's next for Zack Zelner?
What's next is exactly what you see, more of the same. I was jumping from business to business. I defined myself as a serial entrepreneur, as a founder. I liked that 0 to 1, right? 0 to 5, 0 to 10 race. But I didn't want to then do the heavy lifting, the hard work, the day in and day out. Here are the meetings and the structure. But I realized something, Lee. Just because you work for yourself doesn't mean you don't have a job. And just because you have the ability to say, I'm going to cancel my meetings today, or I don't want to do meetings, or this, that, and the other, doesn't make it the right way to operate. There's a level of discipline that actually unlocks much, much greater success. And this is what I see with a lot of business owners, right? When I see somebody who is struggling to cross that chasm, it's that they lack discipline. Day in and day out, coming in and doing the same things, optimizing them week over week, month over month, quarter after quarter. But it's not all about dopamine, right? It's exciting to do the deal. But to build a great company, you have a job. And so for me, it's not about going back to, I'm a founder and I have to figure out all these new problems. It's saying, how do I continue to empower the people who are in a building just a mile up the road from here?
Tremendous words of wisdom, Zack. I speak of this all the time, and it's probably because of my seniority, being much, much older than yourself, but it's the mundanity of success that people don't want to look into, and that's kind of what you're speaking to. So
that's right.
For someone that has grown many businesses, sold them successfully, I know where you're leaning into Thread Studio today, what is the one piece of advice you'd have out there for entrepreneurs that say, I'm opening my business or I'm running my business? What is the one piece you'd have for them to know and look for when selling their business?
When selling their business, come up with a game plan, right? Strategy is really important. There is no result that you are ever going to pull if we just say, let's get out there and improvise. right? And we do this so often with every single element. But you're never going to see Bill Belichick go, all right, boys, you're all talented. Go out there and do your best. That's not how it works, right? So if you are looking to sell your business, figure out the goal. You reverse engineer how you're going to justify a value, how you're going to locate a prospective acquirer, and what you're going to build that actually would provide value to that acquirer. And it's not that complicated, right? You can reverse engineer all of this, but you need to have a plan to do it.
Zack, words of wisdom. I can't thank you enough for coming on the show today.
It's an honor, Lee. Thank you.
What a treat. Listen, for viewers out there, go back. If you're tuning in just now, go back, of course, listen to Zack from the very, very beginning. Tremendous words of wisdom of the successes you've had and what you have today. I wish you continued luck. For our viewers, keep tuning in every single week for new episodes of The Roadmap, and thank you again for watching.
Thanks for watching The Roadmap with Lee Heisman. This has been a JBF Business Media production.